right, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to Monday Night Live number 53. How's everybody doing? Put a one in the chat if you can hear me clearly. Make sure my audio is right. And we got a few things to cover today, right? We've got a few things to cover. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about, well, first of all, I want to address some things, right? We got to do the raw vegan myth busting, um, dietary myths, right? In particular, there's two things that I want to cover. One is going to be about oxalates, and one is going to be about glycation, right? Glycation is a very interesting one. Oxalates is a lot more of a simpler approach, right? The glycation one I'm gonna do afterwards, right? So basically talking about these things. And then after that, I'm gonna get into fasting. And I'm gonna talk about fasting for weight loss and healing from chronic illness. And also, fasting helps to improve your ability to gain muscle mass as well, right? And talk a little bit more about how that works. And my views towards fasting have also changed. I've always been a big fan of fasting, and my whole thing is alternate day fasting, right? Basically, eating every other day. Like that's like my ideal form of fasting. At least it always has been previously. I've since modified that and I've changed my views on fasting, and it's become more of a key part of my dietary strategy, right? So I'm going to talk more about that as well, right? But yeah, so basically, let me catch up with y'all here in the comments. What's going on, Idri? Good to see you in here this evening. Yes, ma'am. Hope you're doing all right. You are absolutely killing it. So big shout out to you. Absolutely. All right, we see y'all coming through in the comments. Put a one in the chat if you can hear me clearly. All right. Mama Do, good to see you in here. Absolutely. Always appreciate seeing you in there. All right. So we got some ones in the chat. There we go. All right, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, all right, all right. There we go. Coming through with the ones. Y'all hear me clearly? There we go. First off, before I go any further, definitely, folks, hit the like button. Like the stream if you like the stream. All right, like the stream if you like the stream. All right. And then tomorrow, I'll also be streaming on TikTok tomorrow. I'll be doing that separately because there's some compatibility issues with how I have my stream set up on YouTube and TikTok. So I'm splitting those up. All right. And then, of course, for those of you who may need some additional support or help, or you have questions, there's a link in the description of this video to book a call with me, right? So you can book a call with me. You can sign up for my newsletter. You actually get notifications for live streams like this, as well as other important information through those emails on my list. You can also sign up for my 12-week mentorship, and it basically is like a video coaching platform telling you step by step what to do. And I'm adding to it, right? So I do live streams, exclusive live streams for members. We do live meal planning. We talk about training strategies, recipes, things like that. We go a lot more in depth about strategy. And I also, when I post those live streams for members, I also have underneath them where I'll post, recipes, diet plan examples, special suggestions and supplements, what supplements to take specifically for certain goals, things like that. Little concoctions that I put together. So a lot of interesting stuff being posted on there also, right? So the goal for Tribe by Noir is to make it into the Netflix of high raw vegan health and wellness, right? So it'll just be a whole bunch of videos just answering every question you could possibly have on training, nutrition, fasting, meal prep, mindset, self-development, the whole thing, right? Straight across the board. So really big stuff there. All right. Sylvia, what's going on? It's the morning here in New Zealand. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Appreciate you tuning in from New Zealand. Big shout out to you. Absolutely. Can you go over a current day of your eating? Are you in a building, cut, or maintenance phase? Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about what I eat actually. And I can share my screen and kind of go through like a chronometer, for example, and talk about how I structure things. So I'll do that as well, right? So yeah, let's get started here. So let's start with oxalates, right? Now, scrolling through TikTok, I came across one of my favorites, the carnivore MD, or he doesn't call himself that anymore. Now it's just Mr. Paul Saladino. And he did a video about oxalates, right? Let's check this out.
Spinach has a lot of oxalates, and the oxalates
Matter of fact, can y'all hear that clearly? You need me to turn that up, or we're
in
good?
spinach actually cause kidney stones for a lot of people. Some people can eat
Let me rewind this a little bit. It sounds kind of low on my end, but y'all let me know if it's fine.
spinach has a lot of oxalates, and the oxalates in spinach actually cause kidney stones for a lot of people. Some people can eat spinach, but a lot of people think this is a great health food, and it causes issues for a lot of people. If you're thriving, don't change anything about your diet. But if you have kidney stones or autoimmune issues, understand that a low oxalate diet is around 40 to 50 milligrams of oxalate.
It's too low. All right. So I appreciate that. So let me turn it up a little bit. All right. Let's see. Maybe I can turn it up to about right there. There we go. It's echoing. It's echoing. That's interesting. Why would it be echoing? All right. So you know what I can do? Hold on. Let me see if I can do that. Because if it's playing twice, that might be. Oh, I think I know why. Give me a second. All right. Let's see now.
Spinach has a lot of oxalates, and the oxalates in spinach actually cause kidney stones for a lot of people. Some people can eat spinach, but a lot of people think this is a great health food, and it causes issues for a lot of people. If you're thriving,
All right. Is that echoing? Did I fix the echo? Does it still sound too low? I don't want to spend too much time on the claim, but okay, perfect. All right, let me rewind that a little bit more because I want to go step by step here.
spinach has a lot of oxalates, and the oxalates in spinach actually cause kidney stones for a lot.
All right, so basically, what he's saying is that spinach has a lot of oxalates, and the oxalates in spinach causes kidney stones, right? Well, he says causes kidney stones for a lot of people. Oxalates don't cause kidney stones, okay? So one thing that I tell people is no one single nutrient in a diet causes health conditions. It's not how it works. In order for oxalates to cause kidney stones, there has to be a presence of something else that is in excess that is contributing to the issue, right? Oxalates have to crystallize in order to become a problem. They don't crystallize just on their own. They have to be bound to something to make that happen, right? So let's continue here.
Lot of people. Some people can eat spinach, but a lot of people think this is a great health food, and it causes issues for a lot of people. If you're thriving, don't change anything about your diet. But if you have kidney stones or autoimmune issues, understand that a low oxalate diet is around 40 to 50 milligrams of oxalates per day. 1 cup of raw spinach has 700 milligrams of oxalates per day. So if you want the nutrients that are in spinach, whether it's vitamin K or iron, just eat a steak, eat some hamburger, eat some liver, and then you will get the nutrients without all of the oxalates in here. Spinach is in fact a vegetable, it's a leaf. The plant doesn't want you to eat this, and humans are not very good at clearing this oxalate. There's an example famously with Liam Hemsworth. He got a kidney stone, and a lot of people have attributed their kidney stones to things like spinach, which has a lot of oxalates in it. So be careful with this one, guys.
Okay. So essentially, in order for your oxalates to be that low, you essentially have to just cut out like all plant-based foods, basically. So this is one of those things where you'll have people on the internet and, their brand is about like eating animal products, right? Eating like an all meat diet or eating like keto with really low carbs and things like that. So they have to kind of spin certain nutrition facts, right, in order to make this case. The reason why you would have to reduce your oxalates that low, the reason why you would have to do that is because your calcium levels are really elevated and your dietary saturated fat and protein levels are really elevated. Okay. So you have to be number one, you have to be dehydrated, insulin resistant. Okay. You have to have high levels of calcium in your diet as well as there's several conditions that you have to meet simultaneously in order to do something like get kidney stones from spinach. Nobody gets kidney stones from spinach. That's not a thing. Okay. If you ever think of anybody having a kidney stone, the only ones who really end up getting kidney stones are people who consume a diet that's high in saturated fat and protein or a lot of animal products. Okay. No one who's like raw vegan or plant-based, with a water-rich diet is getting kidney stones from eating spinach or whatever. That's not a thing. So he had to bring up like this anecdote of like some random, I guess, celebrity who I guess had a kidney stone, and it was like, oh, I'll just reduce spinach. Um, but yeah, ultimately, he doesn't really have any statistics or data to prove that because it's not true, right? In terms of things like kidney stones or gallstones or things like this, the people who mainly get issues like this are just people who are insulin resistant. They have a lot of blood fat, probably high cholesterol, and a lot of protein in their diet, right? So they have a lot of protein in their blood, and they have a lot of protein coming through their urine, et cetera, and a lot of calcium is being leached into their bloodstream. So basically, when you have a diet that's really high in fat and protein, the fat breaks down into fatty acids, the protein breaks down into amino acids. Those acids have to be neutralized and cleared out because they can't build up in your bloodstream because that will kill you, right? So your energy spectrum in your body exists on a pH balance. So you have acid and alkaline, and right in the middle is neutral, okay? So you have alkalizing elements going into your body like oxygen, water, and certain nutrients, right? Nutrients like, for example, potassium, calcium, magnesium, manganese, and iron, right? The five major alkalizing minerals. So when things like this enter your body, they have an alkalizing effect, right? Antioxidants, etc. When you expend or you digest foods like through the digestion process, things get broken down. There's these metabolites that end up resulting from that digestive process. When your body utilizes energy, right, there's an acid accumulation, right? When there's protein breakdown, there's an accumulation of ammonia, there's an accumulation of uric acid, right, lactic acid, things like that, right? So there's acid buildup in your body, and your liver has to neutralize the acids and the kidneys have to clear that excess acid out. Okay. If your liver and your kidneys are not able to keep up with the level of acid that is being accumulated in your body will then deploy calcium and magnesium out of your muscle and bone tissue in order to neutralize the excess acid. Okay. If you are getting a substantial amount of calcium in your diet, like from dairy products and things like that, and then you're also eating an acidic diet, you get this overaccumulation of calcium. That overaccumulation of calcium will then they'll bond with proteins like cysteine, for example, right? Um, your body will also there's lipids, right? Basically, lipids are just fats, right? Fat molecules, and so cysteine, a variety of other different types of proteins, combined with the lipids and the calcium, and under certain conditions, like say dehydration, stones can form. Okay. Same thing with like uric acid. If your uric acid level is high enough, so you're eating protein and the protein's producing purines and that's converting into uric acid in your body, and you're not getting enough water and vitamin C and malic acid and things like that in your diet, that uric acid will gradually start to convert into crystals, right? So this is what gout comes from. So the more protein and saturated fat you consume, the more insulin resistant you are, and the higher your blood fats and calcium is, and the more acid builds up, you get this crystallization of uric acid. So like when you're experiencing things like joint pain, or you're experiencing like numbness, stinging, sharp pains, for example, in your toes, that's a symptom of gout. That's a result of the uric acid forming little crystals inside the connective tissues and stabbing the nerves and etc. And that's what's causing that sharp pain. You can also experience that same thing in your kidneys, right? Because your kidneys have to pass the acid. So you can get these little crystals that float around in your body and that passes through your kidneys and that causes little micro tears or damage, right? So over time, that can erode the nephrons of your kidneys, and these things can also compound into larger stones. And then if you're not hydrated enough and you don't have enough magnesium in your diet and you're not getting enough vitamin D, for example, and you're not getting enough potassium and things like that, your body doesn't really effectively break down the stone so that you can pass it. And this is where you get the issues from. So basically, the issue isn't just oxalates, right? Kiwis are also extremely high in oxalates. No one's getting kidney stones from eating kiwis. As a matter of fact, eating more kiwis can diminish kidney stones. Eating more oranges, more grapefruit, that could diminish kidney stones, right? Eating more apples, pears, cranberries, cherries, things like this, that can break down kidney stones. That can break up the crystallization of acid and whatnot, right? So basically, when you have a diet that is rich in vitamin C, magnesium, manganese, B vitamins, vitamin C, antioxidants, all of these things help to bring down the acid levels and improve acid clearance and insulin sensitivity. So you don't have this over accumulation of fat and protein built up in your blood. Your body is way more effective at shuttling these things into your bone and muscle tissue, etc., and removing it from your bloodstream in the same way that it does with glucose, taking glucose and storing it inside your cells as glycogen. Okay, so this idea that like, oh yeah, just don't eat, spinach, as if the issue is that simple. This oversimplification of these issues is what really, kind of harms people and leaves people misinformed, because the issue is a lot more complex than just don't eat oxalates, right? So I know I said a lot. If anybody needs me to clarify anything, then definitely let me know. Could you prep for a bodybuilding show on this lifestyle without feeling like death and suffering the whole time? Yeah, you can. I mean, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you feel like death and suffering, it's probably because you're not eating enough. And you also may be doing way too much training volume. So the interesting thing about like muscle building, for example, um, you don't want to put more stress on your body than what's needed, right? So example for me, if I can build muscle consistently using 6 sets per week, I'm not doing 10 because I only need 6, right? If I can build muscle adequately and improve my training performance and muscle growth adequately, training 3 times a week, I'm not training 4 times a week, right? I'm not gonna eat more than I need to. I'm not gonna eat less than I need to. Okay. If I feel like garbage, maybe I have low energy or something like that, maybe I need to improve my sleep quality, or maybe I need to eat more of certain types of foods, right? So let's say I'm eating like on a raw diet. I'm not doing like a daily caloric deficit. I'm not doing that. I would rather, if my goal is to drop body fat, I'm gonna designate maybe 2 or 3 times a week to, let's say, fasting days. Maybe I'm doing 20 or 24-hour fasts, or 26 or even 28-hour fasts, 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm doing the fast because the fast is going to bring down my insulin levels in my blood sugar, and it's going to increase glucagon. Okay. So as the glucagon increases and the insulin decreases, my body deprioritizes storage and reprioritizes oxidation, specifically oxidation of glycogen inside my fat cells and my liver. Okay, and I'm going to explain all of this comes more in depth into the fasting part, right? So I'm going to use the fasting strategy, the fasting days, to deplete the excess glucose or the extra glycogen and fat stored inside my liver. And then after that, my body is going to start pulling more fat from subcutaneous fat, visceral fat, et cetera. Right. And I'm going to repetitiously do that on my fasting days to get my body fat down. Okay. So I'm going to use my training days to focus on nutrient storage. So on my eating days, I'm going to eat and get all the nutrients that I need, and I'm going to eat in abundance on my eating days. And then on my fasting days, I'm doing the opposite. If you're just doing like a consistent caloric deficit, essentially what happens is you're not really doing anything effectively. You're not burning fat effectively, and you're not fully stocking your body with the nutrients and the energy needed in order to power the muscle building process. You're not doing either one effectively because you're trying to do both at the same time, right? You know, it's kind of like trying to open a door and close it at the same time. It's not really possible, right? Either you have to open the door first, walk through it, and then close it, or you have to just close it and not walk through it. You can't really do both at the same time. If you're just doing like a deficit, right? The idea of a deficit is, well, I'm just going to eat a little less so that my blood sugar levels drop or stay lower. And if I can use that deficit to keep my blood sugar at a certain point or keep it low enough, then my body's going to tap into stored fat for energy, and that's how I'm going to lose weight. That does generally happen in healthy people. It does not happen in people with metabolic disorders, not to any significant degree. If you're insulin resistant, you can reduce your caloric intake and still have sky high blood sugar. So you end up under eating, not building muscle or losing weight. You just end up feeling exhausted and tired, right? And I'll get more into that when I start talking about the fasting thing as well, and why my views have changed on that. All right, let me see. Let me get back into the true. Hit the thumbs up button. Right. Like the stream if you like the stream. Right, what are the top fruits for building muscle? Well, I'd probably say right now, it's for me, it's going to be bananas, kiwis, grapes, pears. Yeah, I think those are like my top ones right now. Bananas right now for me are at the top of the list. Oh, and peaches. Yeah. Okay. It just turned vegan 1 second ago. Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. That's a real short turnaround. Welcome aboard. I got to do a stream more so on bodybuilding. I don't really consider myself to be a bodybuilder necessarily. You know, I've never done a show. I've never like competed or anything like that in bodybuilding. My thing is not necessarily bodybuilding, but I know a lot about how to build muscle and things like that because I've been a coach pretty much my entire adult life of helping people get in shape and build muscle and things like that. Okay, now let's pivot.
From fruit juice and
Oh, that one's that one's a lot louder. Look at that. So now we got We got my man Ken Berry. So my man Ken Berry actually is a very interesting person because Ken Berry, I don't want to be like mean or rude. I don't want to do that. But Ken Berry, this man has this basically he shamelessly lies about things, right? And the way that he lies about things is very like shocking to me, the way that he does it, because the lies that he tells are not plausible. Like they're implausible lies, right? Um, like for example, if I was to do a video and I said, here's how to reverse cancer, here's how to reverse cancer with just eating McDonald's. You'd be like, I'm not following this guy anymore because it's ridiculous, right? It's even like because it's hard to not talk about it without sounding mean and just calling the guy out, right? But if you see his channel, and I feel like he's gotten worse as time has gone on, like he's gotten a bit more extreme with the claims. And he went from being like a big keto diet advocate to now he's like full on like carnivore, right? To the point where like, oh, cheeseburgers are a health food. You just take the bread off and then it's a health food. It's amazing, right? It's that kind of extreme. It's a little over the top. So he one of his things that he likes to talk about is glycation. And the way that he talks about it, it's very clear to anyone who understands what glycation is and how it works. It's very clear that he doesn't know much about it and hasn't done any reading on it. But he willfully gets on camera and talks about it knowing he doesn't have any evidence for the claims that he's making. And he's aware that he doesn't have evidence for the claims that he's making. And the reason why he's aware is because he's very selective with his words, right? And I'll show you what I mean about that. All right. So look, listen to this.
Fructose from fruit juice and from Coca-Cola and from all the fruits glycates 10 times.
So do you see what he just did there? So like right out the gate, when you start mixing like fructose from soft drinks and cola and fruit combined, you're already off on a bad foot, right? So it's a bit much. And this kind of like right out the gate, I was like, all right, we're coming out strong out the gate.
Fruit juice and from Coca-Cola and from all the fruits glycates 10 times more readily than glucose. There is no test your doctor can check for fructose glycation.
Okay, so claim number one, fruit juice, Coca-Cola, and fruits, all of them, the fructose from all of these things glycates, I guess they're just glycates in your body 10 times more readily than glucose does, right? And then he follows that up with saying, there's no test that you can take to measure this because all of the tests just measure glucose glycation. So basically what he's saying is, I'm going to make a claim and then tell you it does it at 10 times the rate. But there's no evidence for this because it's not borne out in tests. So he's like, basically makes the claim and just says, but you can't measure it. Well, you just gave a measurement. You said 10 times. But why would you say that it does it at 10 times the rate if you can't measure it through the test because the tests don't measure for that? So he just follows it up immediately with, I don't have any evidence for that because it doesn't come out on the test. Okay.
Fructosamine checks for glucose glycation. A1C checks for glucose glycation. Glycated albumin checks for glucose glycation. None of them can even detect fructation or fructose glycation. And so if you're eating a ton of fructose, you're glycating, which is bad. You don't want that. You're gumming up all your cells and tissues, but you can't detect it on any test that your doctor can order.
So then how do you know that? Like, this is what I mean, right? How do you know that? Because he says it does it at 10 times the rate, but it doesn't pick up on the test. Well, how do you know that? He doesn't even say how he knows that. And I'm like, things like that kind of blow my mind, right? Because it's like, if you're going to be like a doctor, you're like a licensed doctor, and you have an internet presence where you just say this stuff and you just don't have any way of actually demonstrating that that's true, it flies in the face of licenses. Because if you could just lie, you know what I mean? Like it's wild, right? So let's talk about the glycation thing. So the idea that fruit is going to gum up the works, as he says, there's no evidence for that. None. And again, I have to point out, there is no one thing, there is no one nutrient from food that disrupts and imbalances your entire metabolism. Right? So I wouldn't come on here and be like, hey, you should avoid calcium in your diet. No. Or you should avoid saturated fat altogether in your diet. No. If I said that, this is why I say, yes, excess saturated fat leads to insulin resistance. That is true. But I wouldn't lump in saturated fat from pork and saturated fat from coconut yogurt in the same group. Sure, both are significant sources of saturated fat to one degree or another, but there's a difference between foods. And it's like, you have these people and they have and it's crazy because they got like millions of followers on the internet. And it's this oversimplicity that they all share in common, right? Whether it's fructose or it's oxalates or it's lectins or it's phytic acid. None of these things work in isolation to cause illnesses. It's not how it works. Every nutrient has a codependent relationship with another nutrient. They don't work in a vacuum on their own. It's not how it works. Right? So there is two scientific terms. One is in vivo and in vitro. Right? In vitro basically is through the looking glass, like in a test tube. In vivo is like inside the body. Right? So they talk about these things as if like, oh, well, I just know this because that's how it plays out in a test tube. It's like, well, do you have actual human trials that demonstrate that? No. And they know they don't. And they'll never point to them because they don't have any evidence for these claims. The problem with high fructose corn syrup. Now, if you was to make the glycation argument with high fructose corn syrup, well, okay, you have an argument. Coca-Cola has very different effects on the human body than fruit consumption does. Here's a big difference. Both contain fructose. The difference is one has excessively high levels of fructose compared to glucose or in relation to glucose, and fruit has a 50-50 split between fructose and glucose. The thing that makes the difference between them, number one, is the ratio of fructose and glucose. So for the carbohydrates that is found inside that product, food or drink or whatever, how balanced is the fructose in relation to the glucose? If you have excessive levels of fructose in comparison to the glucose, because you're trying to make the drink hyper palatable, which fructose is very palatable. Fructose makes things taste really, really good. Fructose tastes very, very sweet. High fructose corn syrup is basically just an ultra refined, high potency fructose, right? High fructose corn syrup. You don't even get it from fruit. But basically, if you have really high levels of fructose, then it tastes really, really good. When you reduce the fructose, now it's not hyper palatable and addictive. So the soft drinks are really high in the fructose and not as much in the glucose. They're high in glucose, but also very high in fructose. And this creates an imbalance between the two. And that imbalance will cause the excess glycation. right? Basically, it causes an oversaturation of fructose inside your system that can then bind to other proteins like collagen. And that's the basis of the glycation. Okay. This doesn't work with fruit, number one, because fruit is a 50-50 split between fructose and glucose. So you don't get this big saturation of fructose inside your system. It doesn't work that way. That's number one. Number two, fruits are rich in fiber and rich in water. Fruits are like 70 to 90% water, 80 to 90% on average. Okay, only dried fruits are much lower in water content, like dates and things like that. So dates taste really sweet because they're very rich in fructose and they're very low in water, right? But basically, fruits normally, they don't have the glycemic load or the glycemic index or the disproportionality between fructose and glucose to cause this excess saturation of fructose inside your bloodstream. Doesn't work that way, right? Fructose isn't really used. Fructose isn't sent to all the cells in your body. Fructose is not stored inside skeletal muscle tissue and things like that. It's sent to your liver, and your liver converts it into glucose. Right? So you can get an overaccumulation of fructose inside your liver. Okay. Then you have to deal with the elements inside food that can reduce glycation. Glycation can be reduced by vitamin C, water content, malic acid, magnesium, right? These are just like a few things. Antioxidants, right? Things like this. When you have a diet that is rich in magnesium, it's rich in water, it's rich in antioxidants, it's rich in vitamin C, and then also you have a healthy gut microbiome or foods that feed your gut microbiome, and then you have a diet that is abundant in B vitamins. This actually does the opposite. This reduces glycation. You can do a Google search right now and type in what reduces glycation, and the first food options that come up are fruit and vegetables. Right? So like what he's saying is like the opposite is true. If you're going to bring in fruit, fruit reduces glycation. It doesn't increase it by 10 times the level. It does the opposite. So when I say like the lying is like so profound and over the top, that's what I mean. Because you're going to lie about something and it's like the opposite is true. It's not even like a lie by omission. It's not like a bending of the truth. It's like a bold-faced lie. That's like if I was to come on here and tell you that I am of pure European descent, where all of my entire family lineage hails from Germany, right? You'd be like, he's black. The hell are you talking about? It's over the top, right? It's a bit obscene, is what I'm saying. Let me catch up with y'all. I'm gonna make sure I keep up with y'all in these comments here. 50-50. So what about being high or high/low on the glycemic index? All are 50-50 fructose or glucose. On average, 50-50 glucose. It's not an exact 50-50, but on average, for the most part, yes. How does that relate to the glycemic index? Fruits don't particularly have a high, are not particularly high in the glycemic index. I think like your fruits that are going to be the highest on the glycemic index are going to have a glycemic index score of like 80 or something like that. But when a fruit has like a high index, a high glycemic index, it usually has a low glycemic load, right? At like 10 or below or something like that. It has like a low glycemic load, right? Which means that because it's so water rich, it's not that calorically dense. And that drives down the glycemic index because you need to eat a lot more of it in order to reach like this saturation level, right? So that, I hope I explained that clearly. If you need me to clarify anything, let me know. Fruits also have vitamins and micronutrients. Yeah, exactly. Right. So you have to, you can't just, oh, just fruit just does this because it has fructose in it. That's insane. There seems to be a spiritual vibrational element when eating fruits. It exposes your shadows. That's interesting. Quite plausible. I mean, if you have a high vibrational diet, I mean, it can cause some internal changes in your life that seem almost supernatural. Fruits also have fiber to help lower, yeah, to help slow the absorption. There you go. Yep, that too. If anything, fruits would do the exact opposite of gumming up your body. I absolutely thrive on 100% fruit. Yeah, well, see, y'all, my audience, y'all get it, right? Y'all get it. Came from OMAD, so one meal a day. Now attempting raw vegan, 10% body fat, muscular build. Is it true I should only eat a palm full of nuts and a small amount of fruit to not get fat? No, that's not particularly true. Um, a palm, if you a palm of nuts, what is that, like 1 or 2 ounces at a time or something like that? That's probably what that means, right? So you're looking at like, well, generally within a raw vegan meal, you probably only want to consume 20 grams of fat within that meal. That could be true, but it's circumstantial. It depends on if you're insulin resistant or not and how much dietary fat you're having in your day overall. So either you can have like small amounts of dietary fat with each meal, or you can just have all of your dietary fats for the day in one meal at the end of the day, right? So that you won't really have the negative blood sugar implications, right? And I can talk about that a little bit more. Hey, Rumson, love from India. I wanted to ask your take on the how does Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger live so long with quite unhealthy habits? In fact, it is known Buffett loves McDonald's and Coke. Well, first of all, billionaires have access to all types of things to help to improve their quality of health. Now, I don't know how healthy Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are. They don't particularly seem to be too healthy, at least when you really look at them. So I don't know. But being wealthy does help, right? I mean, being extremely wealthy does definitely improve your survival odds. Should I add sea salt to my water while fasting? It could be a good idea to do, yeah, to keep your electrolytes up. And I'll get into that too, because I have to cover that as well. So you should. I love to do it again, but your way and see how I feel. Need to book a call with you. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could do the bodybuilding thing. I just need to have a strong motivation to do it because that, you have to be really consistent. I mean, you have to be really get everything is geared towards like building as much muscle as possible while dropping body fat and being as lean as possible, right? So I have to get into that mindset. That's not really like a fixation of what my goals are. But yeah, if I had a strong enough incentive to do it, I had a passion for doing it, I really wanted to do it, I would have to work on my mind to get focused to do it because it's not easy. All right, see, what are some recommended foods to start with when trying to transition to a raw plant base? And that's a long list of stuff, man. I mean, yeah, that's a long list of stuff. I mean, watermelon, cantaloupe, bananas, mangoes, apples, pears, peaches, cranberries, pomegranate, grapes, kiwis, cherries, strawberries, blueberries, right? Arugula, Swiss chard, kale, spinach, broccoli, cabbage, sweet potato, red lentils, any kind of lentils. It's a long list of stuff, right? So yeah, cashews, pistachios, almonds, peanuts, sunflower seed kernels, pumpkin seed kernels, hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. You know. All right. Thoughts on a high raw, vegan, or raw till 4 diets? Fruits during the day and cooked starches, beans at night. Yeah, like that's basically like the 80-10-10 approach, right? So you do fruits all day, and then your last meal of the day is like a cooked meal. Yeah. I mean, that's more or less like a high raw vegan diet. Yeah. My man Ricardo, coach, is there a difference in how long a blood glucose spike from seeded versus seedless fruits? That's interesting. I don't quite know how much the difference is. I would imagine if I had to guess that that's a good question because the seeds in seeded grapes, in my opinion, that would add to the dietary fiber amount in the grapes. So that would fundamentally change how much of a blood sugar spike you get and what period of time and how long it takes for the blood sugar to come down. But yeah, I couldn't say actually because I've never tested that. I don't think I've even looked it up, so I don't quite know. All right, so glycation, right? Um, Glycation essentially is referring to glucose binding to various different types of proteins, mainly collagen or skin cells. And so over time, sustained elevated glycogen can really destroy your skin and age you, right? So basically, what this looks like is when you've been dealing with glycation from your diet, from a poor diet over a prolonged period of time, you can have like a thinner skin, crepey skin, where your skin kind of folds. It has like this accordion. It doesn't have like a plumpness to it. It's kind of thin, dry, a little wrinkly, more lines, that type of thing, right? So there's more folds and your skin is thinner. And that's one of the signs of excess glycation, right? Now, if you want to, fix something like that, or you want to reverse something like that, you would need a diet that's much more rich in things like vitamin C and vitamin E, right? As well as things like malic acid and stuff like that. So you would need to increase your hydration levels also. So when you add more fruit to your diet, you're going to get that abundance of vitamin C. Kiwis, you're going to get abundance of vitamin E. Avocado, you get the vitamin E. Chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, sunflower seed kernels, you get more vitamin E. Leafy green vegetables, Swiss chard, spinach, kale, things like this, right? Arugula, you get more vitamin E, right? A lot of vitamin C, vitamin E, and you also get vitamin K, and vitamin K also helps with your skin quality. With more of the fruits, you get more malic acid. Malic acid is really important for maintaining and protecting your skin. And foods with a rich pigmentation, foods with deep, vibrant colors. The colors are an indication of antioxidants, right? So you've got your carotenoids, polyphenols, tannins, things like this, right? These are things, antioxidants. I mean, they're self-descriptive, right? They reduce oxidation. Oxidation is the breakdown of a thing, right? It's the breakdown of a thing. So antioxidants prevent the breakdown of a thing, right? So they prevent the oxidation. Certain types of oxidation we want and certain types we don't. So for example, if we want to drop body fat, we want fat oxidation, where basically the molecular structure of the fat is broken down by breaking the bonds that connect the molecules together. So you have a chain of fatty acids, and that chain get in the bonds that create the string of the fatty acids. Those bonds get broken in the process of oxidation, right? And those things basically get denatured and broken down and then used or excreted from your body, right? So that's essentially what oxidation does. It's a breakdown, right? So we want that breakdown of fat if we're trying to drop body fat. We don't want oxidation of muscle. Now, there will be oxidation of muscle when you're doing like intense resistance training. And if your volume, if you're training hard enough and more frequently enough, you get more oxidation of muscle tissue. The the way that you reduce oxidation of muscle tissue is you have a diet that is richer in water, glucose, and antioxidants. Right? Increasing protein can help, but it's not going to do what people think, because with protein, you have a low ceiling as far as how much your body can use at a time. So if you only need like 60 grams of protein and you're eating 120, you're not getting the benefits from eating the 120 because your body only needed 60, right? Now, the interesting thing is the more carbohydrates you consume, the more glucose you get. And the more glucose you get, the less protein you need to consume, because the glucose, in large part, reduces the amount of oxidation of that muscle tissue. So the glycogen gets stored inside the muscle tissue. And so when you're training, you're doing resistance training, that type of thing, your body is using the stored glycogen and oxidizing that inside the muscle tissue. The lower that glycogen storage inside your muscle tissue gets, the more at risk the muscle tissue gets into for oxidation, which is called a catabolic state. So if you're just doing set after set after set, rep after rep after rep, and you're just training the crap out of a muscle and depleting that glycogen, the more you deplete the glycogen, the more muscle protein oxidation you incur. Okay. And you accumulate fatigue, and eventually the fatigue is a result of just the oxidation being built up. So the glycogen is depleted and ATP production then slows down, and you get this increase of lactic acid buildup, and these metabolites create like a burning sensation in the muscle, right? This is basically the exhaustion of the muscle, and you're pushing the muscle to like peak oxidation. And so you have to stop. And when you stop, the acid clears out, and then your body makes new ATP inside those muscles, and the stored glycogen in the muscle gets converted into new energy, and then your body pulls glycogen from your liver, dumps it into your bloodstream as glucose, and that glucose gets shuttled to your muscle tissue. And then in the process of shuttling that glucose to your muscle tissue, it gets stored as glycogen, rinse and repeat. This is essentially how the process happens. Okay. Going back to glycogen, in order to reduce glycation, glycation is problematic because glycation produces something called advanced, what's that called? Advanced glycation end products, right? It's a metabolite, basically. And it's basically a toxin in your body that has to be filtered through your kidneys, right? So it's called AGEs for short. So usually, like if you read a scientific study about it, you'll see like capital AGE, lowercase s, and it's AGEs, right? So the AGEs are the problem because that's the thing that leads to the cellular damage and all the problems, right? Interestingly enough, when you have somebody like a Ken Berry who is making these videos about glycation, you know what actually ramps up glycation in foods? Cooking them. In particular, frying, baking, grilling, things like that, right? So this is in large part why fried foods are so bad. It's not necessarily the food, like let's say French fries. It's just potatoes. The potatoes aren't the problem. It's the frying them that's the problem. So when you fry them and then you eat them, you're getting this abundance of AGEs, right? These advanced glycation end products, right? Same thing if you throw like meat on the grill. Okay, so you have all of these keto advocates and carnivore advocates, and they want to talk about glycation, not realizing that a big part of their diet actually produces glycation. And if you look at somebody like Ken Berry, you can tell he has a lot of glycation in his body, and he's diabetic. Right? So he's got like excess belly fat. He's got excess neck fat. He looks aged in the face. He doesn't really particularly have much muscle definition either. He has the body of a diabetic. I'm not ragging on diabetics. I'm just saying what to look for, right? Because his diet is just all just fat, protein, and just acid, right? So over time, he's just wearing out his kidneys and he's making his body more insulin resistant. So if he puts a grape in his mouth, it'll run his blood sugar up to like in the 300s, right? So basically, his blood is very saturated with fat. So if he throws carbs in there, it's gonna send his blood sugar through the roof, right? So for him, his mortal enemy is going to be carbs because how much damage and destruction he's done to his metabolism through the way that he eats. So if you have a diet where you're grilling meats and you're constantly eating cooked meat, right? And then you throw carbohydrates on top of that. Well, the carbohydrates break down into glucose, and the glucose, when exposed to an environment that is saturated in fat and protein, that is a recipe for excessive levels of glycation. It's not the carbs that's the problem, it's the environment that he's introduced the carbs to. No one thing produces the problem on its own. So you'll see a lot of keto advocates, they'll say, hey, I can't eat rice because it'll bloat me up. I feel miserable. Or when I ate grapes, it blew my blood sugar up. My blood sugar went insanely high, right? And they make these stories. And it's like, yeah, because you're diabetic. You're insanely diabetic. That's why. Because basically you have a fatty, protein-rich diet. And so if you throw carbs on top of that, you're going to get all of this chelation and all of this glycation as a result because of the environment that you've created in your body. Right? Every nutrient that you can put in your body has a codependent relationship with something else. You don't create a metabolic disorder with just one thing. It takes at least two things. And there's a series of circumstances that you have to create in order to facilitate that particular metabolic issue. So like when you see like any kind of content that people put out on like health and things like that, that's a major red flag if they're only talking about one thing. This is why in my content, I never do this, right? I don't demonize anything that has saturated fat in it, right? Now, I may say you induce insulin resistance with saturated fat, but I'm not talking about any food. I'm not going to say coconut yogurt, avoid it, or coconut, avoid it, or cashews, avoid it, or anything with saturated fat in it, you should avoid it because you're going to get diabetes. No, that's not how it works. And this is why I talk about food choice a lot, and I name so many different types of foods because, look, nutrition, it's more of a complex thing. It's not that simple. It's not grapes are the devil, or spinach is bad, or, fruit is the same as Coca-Cola. It's a juvenile oversimplification of nutrition, right? So moving on to fasting and some of my views on fasting, right? So I started off with my first form of fasting was intermittent fasting. It was the standard 16-hour fast, 8-hour eating window, right? Then it went over to alternate day fasting, right? And so my thing was once a year, I do alternate day fasting for 8 to 12 weeks. 8 to 12 weeks out of the year, once a year, right? And I do 3 36-hour fasts a week. So I only eat 4 days a week and I fast 3 days a week. Every week for 8 to 12 weeks, right? That was my thing. A lot of you found my channel this way, right? With that whole video, I talk about I only eat 4 days a week, right? It's that kind of thing. And in explaining why that is. The reason why I switched over from intermittent fasting to the alternate day fasting strategy is because, well, when you learn more about what makes fasting as effective as it is, well, now you get a better understanding of how you should fast. Number one, it's very important to understand that human beings do not need to eat multiple times a day, every day, right? You don't need to. There's no reason for it why you need to do that every day. You don't. We really, really, really overestimate the amount of food that we need to eat and how frequently we need to eat. Right? As a kid, you heard, oh, you know, you can't skip breakfast. It's the most important meal of the day. It's not true. Right? Or, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a cultural thing. There's no science behind that. It's just not true. Right? Or that you need to eat dinner. No, you don't need to eat dinner either. Human beings are largely opportunistic eaters. Human beings have always been this way. The human body is really, really good at storing a lot of nutrients for very long periods of time. Your whole entire life, you've been storing nutrients in your body. And as that storage increases, your body grows. So, for example, a baby just keeps storing nutrients. Every time you breastfeed, every time you drink from the bottle, every meal you eat, your body keeps storing that nutrients. And then your body grows. And the growth allows your body to store more nutrients. And you keep growing. The thing is that your body stops growing. When you reach adulthood, your body stops growing. Here's where all the problems start. It's because you keep eating and storing things, but your body's not growing anymore because it doesn't need to. You're a fully grown adult. There's nothing else to grow. Your legs are not going to get longer. Your arms are not going to get longer. Your head is not going to get bigger. Your skull is not going to get harder. That's it. You're locked in. Boom. Stop. The only reason why you needed to eat that much when you were a baby or when you were a child is because when you're growing, you're a fully grown adult. You already have all the nutrients that you need. You don't need to eat so much. Right? You're good. You can stop. The older you get, your capacity for growth diminishes. Right? But your capacity for growth as you age depends on your lifestyle. Your body grows in different ways as you get older. As you get older, you can keep building muscle mass. You can just keep doing it. There is a genetic ceiling of how much muscle mass you can gain in a lifetime. And the more muscle mass you gain, the slower it becomes. And the reason why is because there's only a certain amount of your total lean mass that can be designated towards muscle mass. So you have the weight of your bones and your vital organs, right? And then you have your skeletal muscle. The more disproportionately you grow your skeletal muscle mass in proportion to everything else, your skeletal muscle mass starts becoming this greedy, energy hoarding thing in your body. And it starts causing you problems. This is also a lot of why like bodybuilders, like really professional, like elite level bodybuilders end up dying in their 40s and 50s. And it's because skeletal muscle mass and having a lot of it is beneficial up until a point. Generally speaking, your lean mass, half of it, like 50% of it roughly, is skeletal muscle tissue. You can go a little bit beyond that, right? You can go to like 56%, 60%, 65%. I mean, you can really push the numbers. But as you push the numbers, the skeletal muscle mass becomes harder to retain because of how metabolically needy it is. Right? That's why people have to do all this extreme stuff in order to maintain it. Because your body is like, yo, I don't chill, it's too much. You become over encumbered. Because all that muscle mass needs more blood flow. So you need a bigger heart. You need more blood pressure, right? You start getting an enlarged prostate, enlarged pancreas, everything's just start enlarging in order to facilitate all of the acid buildup from muscle mass. Because the thing is, muscle mass is very metabolically active and it produces metabolites when you use it. And so your vital organs have to be able to handle the metabolic load, not just the inputs, but also what the muscle mass puts out. Because more muscle mass means more waste products. So not only do you need to give muscle mass more fuel, but it also puts out more waste products, which means more stress on your kidneys, which means more storage of toxins in your liver. So your body has to do more. It's more demanding, and it wears on you the older you get, right? And this is why skeletal muscle mass it's important, but up into a point, okay? So there is a benefit though, and I want to talk about fasting in particular because fasting is very interesting. And the reason why fasting works is because, well, first of all, the human metabolism is not like calories in, calories out. That's not a thing. There's no such thing as calories in. There's only calories out. There is no calories in. You put things in, and that can increase or decrease caloric expenditure, caloric burn. Right? You don't really, there really isn't even a such thing as caloric expenditure. There's just a caloric burn. Calories is a measure of thermogenic energy. The more thermogenesis your body creates, the more the caloric burn increases. It's essentially how that works, right? It's just a measure of heat energy. Less thermogenesis, lower calories. More thermogenesis, increase in calories, right? Fasting works because of what it does for your hormone balances. When you eat, like let's say you eat some carbs, eat some fats, eat some proteins, your body will secrete, or your pancreas will secrete insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone. By the way, it drives me nuts when people say insulin is a fat storage hormone. No, it's not. If insulin was a fat storage hormone, then your pancreas would release insulin or a lot of insulin when you eat a lot of fat. It's not what happens, right? The reason why fat is extremely low in the glycemic index is because insulin is not a fat storage hormone. Insulin is a glucose storage hormone primarily. So when you eat carbohydrates, the carbohydrates break down into glucose. The glucose enters your bloodstream. Your pancreas releases insulin. That insulin then binds to the glucose and shuttles it into your cells to be stored inside your cells as glycogen. Mainly skeletal muscle tissue, your liver, visceral, and subcutaneous fat primarily. And then the rest is used by your brain, your nervous system, vital organs, etc. Right? It's essentially how that works. So when you eat, your body releases insulin, shuttles that glucose into your cells. Your body wants to store whatever you eat and then use it later. That's primarily what your body does. So it prioritizes storing what you just ate and then burning what you ate before, like further back in the timeline, right? On the flip side of insulin, you have glucagon. Glucagon is also released from your insulin, from your pancreas. It does the opposite of what insulin does. Glucagon actually causes the oxidation of glycogen. So rather than the formation of glycogen inside your cells, it does the opposite. It breaks down glycogen, and it removes it facilitates the breakdown of glycogen and the using it for energy and dumping it back into your bloodstream. Right? So basically glucagon goes up, and as glucagon goes up, you get this lipolysis, and you get a breakdown of glycogen stored inside your liver, right? This is the first thing that happens. You can store around 100 grams of glucose inside your liver as glycogen, right? So it's like 430 calories worth of glycogen inside your liver or something like that, right? So when your glucagon levels go up, the glycogen stored inside your liver starts to break down, and that glucose enters your bloodstream and then gets taken up by other elements in your body, like your skeletal muscle tissue and your brain and your nervous system. Right? If your liver glycogen is full, when you introduce more glucose into your system, your liver will actually synthesize more fat. This process is called lipogenesis, right? So basically, if you are at capacity, as far as glucose is concerned, or glycogen, lipogenesis increases, okay? And that makes room for more glycogen storage. If this persists, you end up getting a fatty liver, right? Your liver becomes too heavy and it becomes dysfunctional. You keep eating, right? Because when you eat, your liver prioritizes taking up that glucose, right? So your liver is like your liver is like destination A, and then everywhere else is like destination B and C and D, right? So to the liver first, and then to everywhere else afterwards. So if your liver is at capacity, you eat more carbs, and your muscle tissue is at capacity, and your fat cells are at capacity. And basically what happens is your body says, well, we got to do something with this glucose. We can do a few things. We can either remove this excess glucose through urine, or we can increase lipogenesis and synthesize new fat to then store this glucose inside those fat cells, right? If you sustain this for long enough, that's how you get obesity. So insulin gets a bad rap because insulin and lipogenesis are like this parallel thing. As insulin levels elevate, your body's propensity for lipogenesis increases. So as your insulin goes up and your blood sugar goes up, lipogenesis goes up. So you get more fat formation as the insulin levels increase, right? And as your blood sugar keeps rising, your insulin level also needs to keep rising. So they keep doing this and notching up. If you keep eating on a consistent basis, your blood sugar and your insulin keep climbing and lipogenesis keeps climbing. And this is how you get things like diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, etc. Right? That's the basis for it, because there are things that change this. So that's not a universal thing that's guaranteed to happen. It happens more or less, but the degree that it happens to depends on food choice. Okay? But anyways, glucagon basically drives down lipogenesis and increases lipolysis. It does the opposite. Okay? Now, there's a few things that increase glucagon secretion. Exercise, a calorie deficit, which a calorie deficit is basically just eating less food, so getting less fuel, exogenous fuel into your body, and fasting. These are like the primary things. And then there's things like caffeine, right? Like a stimulant like that, a pre-workout, these types of things. So like caffeine, fasting, exercise, these things increase glucagon. As your blood sugar comes down, your insulin levels also come down and your glucagon goes up. And then as your glucagon goes up and your insulin levels go down, you get more oxidation of the glycogen storage in your liver. Your liver empties out. And then when your liver empties out, as your liver is emptying out, your fat cells, like that belly fat and the visceral fat on top of your organs, that starts to empty out. Right? So your liver empties out first, and then your fat cells, your subcutaneous fat, your visceral fat, that belly fat, everything stored around the midsection, that starts to empty out second. And then the more time your liver spends in that low glycogen state, fat oxidation will happen in your liver, and the amount of stored fat in your liver will also decrease. Right? Now, as that decreases, this increases insulin sensitivity in the background. The less fat your body is storing, or the less fat that is present in your body, the more insulin sensitive you become. Because a lack of fat storage inherently causes more insulin sensitivity. So that when you do start eating again, your body is going to be a lot more receptive to the storage of the glucose that produced the insulin release in the first place. So fasting, and this is independent of like a deficit of just eating less food. Because the thing is let's say, this is the thing, the reason why fasting matters is because of nutrient timing. So if y'all have been following me for long enough, you'll hear me talk, right? I'll say, you need to eat more. You need to eat in abundance. Because this lack of eating is what's driving you deeper into metabolic health issues, obesity, etc. Now, you may hear me say that, and you're like, but you just said with the whole insulin and the glucagon thing, and this is where things kick in. The reason why I say that is because it is better for you to eat more rather than eat smaller meals more spaced apart. People who typically don't eat that much, they eat like breakfast and they skip lunch and they eat dinner, or they skip breakfast, they eat lunch and they eat dinner, right? So scenario A, let's say you skip breakfast, you just eat lunch and you eat dinner. You wake up in the morning, your blood sugar's high, so you skip breakfast. If you skip breakfast, this gives an opportunity for your blood sugar to come down. But then lunchtime hits. And by the time lunchtime hits, your blood sugar's fairly low, but then you eat and you spike your blood sugar back up again. Then your blood sugar starts to come down, and then dinner time you eat again and your blood sugar spikes up again. And then you have this high blood sugar and you go to bed at night and your blood sugar gradually comes down in your sleep at night, right? And then your blood sugar gets low at night, and then you wake up with hunger cravings because your blood sugar's low. And then what do? You go and you snack, you go into the fridge in the middle of the night and you eat something in order to get back to sleep. So then your blood sugar's back up again. You fall to sleep because the snack gave you the glucose to calm your brain. You can relax and go to sleep. The adrenal output has decreased, so you can go back to sleep, right? In the morning, you get an increase in cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So that brings your blood sugar back up in the morning. You're getting all of these blood sugar spikes repeatedly throughout the day, even though you don't eat that much in the first place, right? But the foods you are eating, chances are you don't eat that much during the day. You only eat 1-2 meals or something like that. But you're combining all of your carbs and fats and proteins in the same meal. And if you have a substantial amount of carbohydrates in the meal and fat and then protein, that creates a bigger insulin spike, a bigger blood sugar spike. And that blood sugar level is sustained for a longer period of time. It doesn't come back down as quickly. So even though you've reduced the food intake, you haven't reduced the levels of insulin and blood sugar enough to lose weight because you keep interrupting the metabolic process. Your blood sugar's coming down, your insulin's coming down, and then as soon as you feel it, boom, you start eating again. The moment you feel hungry, boom, you eat again. It goes back up. You start to feel a little hungry, a little tired, boom, you eat, and it's back up again. So you keep pushing it back up. And if you do that day in and day out, you just keep raising your insulin. And you keep your insulin and your blood sugar perpetually elevated all the time, even though you don't eat that much. Right? And this is why you can have somebody like a Ken Berry or any of these keto people, and they eat a handful of grapes and their blood sugar shoots up into the 300s. The grapes aren't that calorically dense, but again, if it's a high fat, high protein environment, what you're doing is you have high levels of glucagon and then you throw carbs on top of that, and that just ramps up your insulin big time. Because your body's like, oh, look at all of this glucose just came out of nowhere. Turn the insulin on. Yeah, but the glucagon is already elevated. Right? So you had the glucagon elevated, you throw the carbs in, and then the insulin shoots back up big time. And your body overcompensates for the glucose exposure that just came out of nowhere. Right? So now you have this mix of high glucagon and insulin at the same time. So then it drives down the glucagon and raises the insulin. So then if you stop eating, then the insulin levels come back down, the blood sugar comes back down, and then you got a headache, you feel hungry, you feel tired, you get into food cravings, etc., and all of that type of stuff because you didn't put yourself on this roller coaster. And this is why food choice is important, because it's hormonal implications. It's not calories in, calories out, it's hormonal. So you could say, well, if I just need to get my blood sugar and my insulin down, well, how do I do that? Well, you could eat more protein-rich and more fat-rich foods, which is what keto people advocate for. So let's say you do a keto diet, you eat a ton of dietary fats, your food is primarily fat, right? You keep eating fatty foods, that's a great way to keep your blood sugar low. Here's the problem. You keep your blood sugar low, but you also push yourself into dehydration and you start hemorrhaging electrolytes. Dehydration and a lack of electrolytes leads to brain fog, muscle cramps, spasms, heart palpitations, all of this nastiness, right? Dark urine, etc. Right? And the longer you sustain that, you get high blood pressure, you get this really elevated cholesterol, you become even more insulin resistant. So then if you basically do increase your carbohydrates while in that state, guess what happens? You dump in some carbs, boom, your blood sugar's through the roof because you've been dehydrated and saturated with fat and protein, and the glucagon was elevated, and your everything. So basically, you just have this whole soup, and you throw the carbs on top of that. It's this big whiplash that you get. You get metabolic whiplash. And then they blame the carbs, right? It's kind of like you go up to a random stranger in the street and you slap the hell out of them for no reason. And then they turn around and slap you back. And you go, oh my God, they just slapped me. This person is a horrible human being. It's like, well, you slapped them first. You got slapped as a reaction to you slapping them. It's the same thing. Like, yeah, your blood sugar got pushed up by the grapes as a reaction to what you ate beforehand. You can't blame the grapes. So moving on to fasting, fasting is like, it's more consequence free than just eating a bunch of fat and protein. Even though fat raises glucagon, dietary fat raises glucagon, dietary protein raises glucagon, and insulin comes down. But it's not risk free because you create this insulin resistant environment when you do that. Fasting doesn't. Because remember, the insulin resistance is a result of the saturation of your body with fat and protein. That's what creates the insulin resistance. Your body's not going to be insulin sensitive if your diet doesn't require any significant amount of insulin. You don't need it. Right? So basically with fasting, you get the increase in glucagon, but you don't get the saturation with fat and protein. So the fasting gives you the opportunity to bring down the blood sugar, bring down the insulin, and bring up the glucagon, reduce lipogenesis, and increase lipolysis. What people make the mistake of doing, a fast has to be at least 12 hours long to have any kind of benefit. At least, but this is like a bare minimum. So people do a 16-hour fast. So they're in a fasted state by the time they're past the 12th hour. So they get like 4 hours of like the benefits of a fast if you do 16, but it's just 4 hours. But if you resume your diet and then basically you're eating foods that's just ramping up your insulin through the roof again, you basically override all of the benefits you just had from the intermittent fasting. So people are like, oh, I did intermittent fasting, but it didn't really work for me like that. It's like, yeah, because the things you were eating were basically canceling out all of the benefits from the fast. So you use a 16-hour fast, you start to bring down your blood sugar and your insulin, but then you eat and you just run it back up again. So you just erase all that progress. So you don't get anywhere. Now, what happens if you do a fast for 24 to 36 hours? Basically, you're in that fasted state by the 12th hour. You're in real deep by the 16th. By the 20th stage of the fast, you're getting all of the metabolic benefits. And then the 24th hour, you're just in it deep. Because the longer you stay in the fast, the deeper you get into the fast. So let's say you don't eat for a whole entire day. You don't eat for a whole 24, 27, 28 hours. You can basically get like a good 1,000 to 12 or even 1,600 calories worth of caloric burn or thermogenesis with uninterrupted glucagon and uninterrupted decrease of insulin. It's uninterrupted. Because like I said before, the calorie deficit is you keep eating, you're interrupting those metabolic changes. With the fasting, you get a nice, smooth, seamless transition into the hormonal change. There's nothing interrupting it. So you do the fast, right? Then you have some caffeine, it pushes you into the fast quicker. You do some walking, it pushes you into the fast quicker. You do a little bit of mobility exercises, things like that, it pushes you into the fast quicker. Because those things in combination with the fast ramp up glucagon and ramp up lipolysis and reduces the lipogenesis. So you spend the whole day priming your metabolism to be efficient at clearing out not just fat, but also waste products. So going back to the glucagon, right? Going back to the glycation we're talking about, right? The ages, all of that gets significantly reduced, and now your skin can actually start healing and regenerating. Your brain releases something called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which increases neuroplasticity, nervous system function, and signals autophagy, which is basically a breakdown and removal of waste products and acid, which helps to alkalize and heal your body. You remove dead things, you make room for new things, right? So you improve your body over time throughout this entire metabolic process. Again, uninterrupted. Now you can get an increase in autophagy and brain-derived neurotropic factor and growth hormone and things like that from exercise, but it's short term, right? Because you can't exercise for 12 hours multiple times a week. You can't. Okay, I would advise you to do that because you actually destroy your metabolism doing that. You destroy your thyroid, you destroy your adrenal glands, and you destroy your kidneys doing that. I wouldn't advise that. So you can fast though for 12, 16, 20, 24, 36 hours. You can. It's much more sustainable than if you were to just try to do it with exercise. So people will do a caloric deficit and then be like, well, I'm just going to do more cardio and resistance training. So you're giving your body less fuel and less protein in order to sustain your muscle mass, and then you're increasing your energy output. Remember what I said about muscle protein oxidation? As the glycogen in the muscle depletes, you become more susceptible to muscle loss. So if you deplete muscle glycogen with exercise, and then you reduce the refueling of the muscle glycogen, well, you're destroying the muscle from both ends and you're inhibiting recovery. As a result of that, what happens is you get less acid clearance, you get more burnout, right? And you're more susceptible to joint damage, injuries, and things like that. You basically just run yourself into the ground doing that. Because every strategy that you deploy, it needs a counterbalance. It's kind of like you do high intensity resistance training and then you do high intensity cardio and then you cut your food intake. Okay, well, all three of those things are breaking you down. You need to have something in your strategy that's going in the opposite direction, that's building you up. For everything that you deploy that's breaking you down, you should have something on the other side that's building you up. Remember what I said, everything has a codependent relationship with something else. Right? Fasting isn't a bullet. It's one side of the spectrum. You have to have a diet that's compatible with the results that you expect to get from the fast. So a while back, I talked about having a soft landing, right? Your diet, your strategy should give you a soft landing, okay? So that when you stop or you switch strategies, you don't fall flat on your face. You don't have a hard landing, right? Like a good airplane pilot knows how to land smoothly, right? You've ever been on a flight before where the landing is make you a little nervous because you feel the drop and the plane will start landing, you know, when you're almost about to land and you feel that drop and you feel like in your stomach rising, you feel that quick drop, boom, boom, right? Boom. And the pilot keeps notching down. You're like, oh, God damn, chill, ease it up a little bit, right? And then they come in and the wheels hit the runway all hard, you're rocking and carrying on. And then like it's this really abrupt slowdown. So like your face is in like the seat in front of you and all of this, and you got to pull back, and then it's just this hard, brutal landing. They slam on the brakes and they notch it. It's all this nuttiness, right? And you're like, that pilot is a lunatic, okay? I feel like I almost died. You have a good pilot, you don't even really realize you landed. It's smooth. That's how your strategy should be. And so you have to have these counterbalancing mechanisms in your strategy, right? So if you want to have a smooth landing, you have to prep for the landing earlier so you give more time in the landing to step down more gradually and slowly to make a more seamless, smooth landing. You don't want a hard, abrupt nosedive and then bam, and a short, hard stop. You don't want that. And people do that with their strategies when it comes to fasting and diet and all of this type of stuff, right? So you have to have like a principled approach to these things. So tying the fasting in my changes of how I approach fasting is because I viewed fasting as a thing that you don't really have to do all year. You don't have to. You can if you want. You don't have to. So what I would do is I would say, you know what you should do? You do like the alternate day fasting, 36-hour fasts, 12 weeks, once a year. So you're only cutting once a year and you're building your body the rest of the year, right? In order to really pull that off successfully, you have to nail the 12 weeks of alternate day fasting correctly. So don't like do it and you're missing days or your diet is kind of going against it and all this stuff. And then like you stopping early or you're doing it for too long or you did it for too short and then you stopped and then you jump back on and because then you mess up the whole progress of it. That's an aggressive approach. My mindset changed when I realized that, you know what, if you adequately balance out alternate day fasting without having any dietary gaps, you can make it more sustainable. So what if you did like 24-hour fasts and you did a 24-hour fast 2 to 3 days a week? You ate in abundance on your eating days and then you ate one meal after 24 or 28 hours of fasting the following day. You can actually do something like that and sustain an approach like that for the whole entire year. And the cool thing about it is that doing that, it's not meant to be an aggressive weight loss strategy, but what it does is it improves your metabolism and your hormonal profile. And it sustains the improvements. Because you're not ending the fasting, but you're not like really cutting your food intake any like significantly to any degree. Right? So like for me, for example, I've been doing this this strategy for a while now. I don't remember when I started. I think it's been like maybe a month of doing it. And what's interesting is the thing that I notice is my mental clarity and focus has been a lot sharper. And the fasts have gotten significantly easier. And I'm not sacrificing anything. And I realized that my training performance has not taken a hit at all. Now, with the alternate day fasting, with the 36-hour fasts, there came a point in time where I felt like I needed to stop because it turned on me. And that typically happened after like 12 weeks. By like the 12th week going into the 13th week, I'm like, all right, I got to stop. Because I'm outpacing it, right? I'm running out of road. So I started to not really have like a smooth landing. So now I'm doing it a bit differently because for the last 3 years, I did this 8 to 12 weeks. The last time I did it on like more of a fully raw diet and I dropped weight really, really quickly. Within like 8 weeks, I was down like 15, 16 pounds. And I was like, I don't want to drop weight that quick. So I had to stop, right? So this time I'm doing it in a more modified version. And I realized that when I look at people with metabolic disorders, diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, etc., and I realize the biggest problem is handling the eating every day consistently and balancing out and trying to improve your hormonal profile through food. Consistent and frequent eating, you get tired of it. When you eat, you get like a dopamine release when you eat, right? The problem with repetitiously eating every day, especially when you're eating in a regimented way, and you keep eating the same foods over and over and over, you develop dopamine resistance. Kind of like people produce insulin resistance. You get dopamine resistance. So the rewarding sensation or the feeling that you get from eating these foods, you don't really get that anymore. So you don't enjoy your food as much because you're not getting as much of a dopamine hit from eating these foods. So then you fall off the wagon and then you like start eating, so you deviate from the plan because you just want to eat something else that's a bit more palatable, right? So Doritos, like a bag of Doritos, will start looking different, right? And that's what happens when you keep eating every day, 7 days a week, very consistently, 3, 4, 5 meals or whatever. You get tired of the meal prep. You get tired of the same foods over and over. You get tired of having to take time out of your day and sit down and eat. A lot of people run through this. So they keep eating. And then some people they'll say, well, I don't really feel hungry that much anymore. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like the more you eat, you feel well fed, and then like you're like, I don't really feel. It's getting harder for me to finish eating my food because I feel more full. I don't feel as hungry anymore. And the reason why is because you're topped off. your glycogen stores are full. And when your glycogen stores are full, your appetite is gone. You hit leptin, right? So you have ghrelin, what makes you hungry. Leptin gives you a fulling sensation. And so the more your glycogen stores get full, your ghrelin cuts off and leptin kicks on, and you feel full. And as you feel full, you don't really want to eat as much. It's hard to stick to a plan, etc. But then when your glycogen stores are always full and you keep eating, you start getting these excessively high blood sugar numbers, and you start to run into insulin resistance that can gradually build up as you keep eating, right? Because you're kind of like overeating at this point, right? You keep eating, the dopamine resistance makes it harder for you to stick to your workout routine. So you start missing days in the gym. You don't really want to follow your training plan. Things kind of fall off. This is why dopamine is so important. Fasting helps to maintain insulin sensitivity and dopamine sensitivity. So it kind of makes it even more sustainable than eating every day. That's one of the biggest changes that I noticed. I'm like, oh, shoot, you know what? Not eating all day, every day, 3 times a week, that's not the extreme thing. It's eating every day, 7 days a week, multiple meals a day. That's extreme. Because for most people, it just eats into your dopamine sensitivity. And the thing is that it's not just food that contributes to the dopamine resistance. It's scrolling through social media, it's watching TV shows, it's whatever gives you a dopamine hit, right? So every little thing that gives you a dopamine hit drives you upper more to dopamine resistance, right? So you get overindulgent in your life and you develop dopamine resistance, and then you start to not really enjoy things that much anymore. So you start missing meals, you start skipping workouts, you get sluggish, you get lazy, right? And you realize there's no real such thing as laziness, it's dopamine resistance. So you go back in the other direction, you stop eating, you stop engaging in the scrolling through social media, and you do things like meditation, fasting, you start doing going for walks in nature on your fasting days. You're engaging in things that's much less hyper palatable and stimulating. Like TikTok, after a while, I have to stop because TikTok will destroy your dopamine sensitivity, because TikTok is like video after video after video and bright colors, and one video is in the summer, one video is in the winter, one video is cartoons, one video is explosions, one is somebody yelling in your face, boom, jump cuts, bam, 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 Netflix, Amazon, in your face, foods, noise. And that eats into your dopamine resistance. And then to the point, you can scroll through TikTok mindlessly for like 2 hours and not feel it. And so you're running yourself into dopamine resistance. You don't even realize it because it's this insidious thing that creeps up on you. And so you step on the scale, you start doing measurements, and you're like, God damn, I fell off. I'm gaining back body fat and all this type of stuff. I fell off my training and all of this. It just sneaks up on you. You don't even realize it's happening because dopamine resistance makes you less sensitive to what you're doing. It makes you less sensitive to your behaviors. You start skipping things. You start not being as disciplined. You just start falling off. You don't even realize you're doing it. You become zombified. This overexposure and access to things. It's like men who develop erectile dysfunction because they masturbate too much, right? They're always watching porn. They're always masturbating to the point where they just lose their libido. It just falls off a cliff. They lose morning wood and everything. It's that overexposure, right? So fasting is like abstinence from this overexposure. And you can fast from social media. You can fast from food. You can fast from whatever. It's a concept. So we talk about fasting, it's really like just abstinence. And we're just applying it to like food, right? So basically, fasting is a way to recondition yourself to the things that you're supposed to like food. So in the wintertime, if you want to be able to sustain higher levels of comfortable body heat, get acclimated to the cold, right? So like on fasting days, I'll do exercise and mobility stuff and whatnot in the cold outside. I'll take my shirt off and all of this type of stuff and just embrace the cold while on an empty stomach fasting, right? And it does wonders for my mental health and my drive. I feel insanely motivated doing that. I just want to do stuff. I become hyper aware of my surroundings, my own personal behavior, everything, my thoughts. I just get locked in. It's a great feeling. Like when you're locked in, you're just all the way dialed in. It's an amazing feeling. You feel productive, you feel confident, your self-esteem raises, you just feel you're firing on all cylinders. It's a phenomenal feeling because you're improving dopamine sensitivity, you're improving insulin sensitivity, you're getting you're getting battle tested, right? You're getting reinforced to the point hunger don't even hit you the same, right? Hunger is not moving you off of your square. You're locked in, right? You don't even notice your hunger. And the thing is that the lower your insulin levels are, what happens is now your glucagon is so elevated, your muscle glycogen in your liver and everything like that, all your vital organs are being sustained by fat oxidation. Fat is being turned into glucose, being dumped into your bloodstream and your brain and your muscle tissue and your vital organs and your bones, they're just sucking all of that right up, right? So you're getting all of this fat burn and all of this hormonal benefits and healing and detoxification and kidney health improvements and all this type of stuff in your fasting day. And then you eat, and your eating days is like reloading the gun, right? You're putting all of your rounds right back into that magazine and sliding that magazine right up into the gun and getting chambered, locking it in, ready to go. That's what your eating days are like. And you can keep that going like perpetually. Some people do like OMAD where they eat once a day every day. But the thing about OMAD for me, I don't want to give up fruit. And if I'm going to have a high fruit diet, I can't do OMAD, right? Because I have to eat more frequently throughout the day. So I get the best of both worlds. I get the fasting, I get the OMAD, and I get the full day of eating where I get to eat in abundance. So I'm like, you can sustain that perpetually, and it's a lot easier to sustain. But my mindset has changed because of that, of learning those things. So I had a bit of a paradigm shift where I realized that one of the biggest benefits of the fasting is not just the insulin sensitivity and all of that, it's the dopamine implications, the mental health, the drive. You can't be motivated without dopamine. Can't. Doesn't happen. On top of the weight loss, the hormonal improvements, the dopamine sensitivity, is acid clearance. Acid, basically waste products, right? You eat today, you eat in abundance, and then take the fasting day to clear out all the waste products and the stuff you don't need. It's a trash removal day. Obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disease, kidney disease, liver disease, all of this is a result of just accumulating trash. Not even just accumulating trash, but just accumulating just an excess of stuff. You're hoarding stuff. And the hoarding is wearing out your kidneys, is wearing out your liver, it's wearing out your heart, it's wearing out your vascular system, it's wearing out your bladder, it's wearing out your adrenal glands, it's wearing out your thyroid, right? It's wearing out your pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland is kicking out all this TSH, all of this thyroid stimulating hormone to try to increase T3 levels. You get this increase in T4, but then there's a low conversion of T3. So then your thyroid hormone, your thyroid is really kicking, but it's not translating into anything else because your liver's gummed up. Your testosterone's low, the estrogen's high, but the estrogen is creating TBG, thyroxine binding globulin that's binding up your T3. So then when you eat carbs, your blood sugar levels go through the roof, you feel lethargic, brain fog, memory loss, etc. You're all metabolically congested because too much fat, too much estrogen, low testosterone, and just the excess accumulation of fat and protein and acid buildup that your liver and your kidneys are working super hard to keep up with. You can fix that with a trash removal day. And that could be your fasting day, and you can do it several times a week. So it's a phenomenal strategy, basically, because you have both ends of the spectrum balanced. You have an inflow day where you maximize storage and filling nutrients, and then another day where you're clearing out, you're cleaning out, getting rid of stuff you don't need, right? That's a lot easier to maintain. A fruitarian diet is very easy to maintain because you can't really overeat fruit. You can't. The more fruit you eat, the more insulin sensitive you get. And the reason why is because fruit is like very minuscule amounts of fat. Fruits are just not high in fat. So if you're eating all fruit, you're not going to reach any degree of saturation of fat and protein in your system. So there's no basis for insulin resistance. So there's no basis for weight gain. There's no basis for diabetes formation or even making it worse. You can't do it. The more fruit you eat, the less fat and protein saturation you have. The less fat and protein saturation you have, the more insulin sensitive you get. That's it. The fat and protein kick on glucagon and the carbs kick on insulin. You can't really be kicking on both at the same time. You want to split one or the other. Right? When there's a split, what if you had all of your carbs and water rich foods in one portion of the day, and then you had all of your fats in the later portion of the day? That's another benefit as well. So you load up on your carbs. Let's say you get like 300 grams of carbs in the morning and early afternoon portion of the day. And then you eat your fats. And then you go to bed. And then you have a fasting day the next day. There's no real blood sugar implications to that. And the reason why is because, yes, you got a lot of fats and some good amount of protein before you went to bed, but you didn't throw carbs on top of it. So there's nothing that's going to run your blood sugar up after you've eaten that meal because it's a fasting meal the next day, right? So that's another way to do it. So if you want to further improve the results, you partition your meals, carbs throughout the day, and then you get your protein and fats, and then you go to bed, rather than mixing them in, right? One meal a day. You have your meal, you get a mix of fats and proteins and carbs and things like that. Sure, you're mixing everything together, but the glycemic load is not as high, number one. The fat load is not as high, number two, and the protein load is not as high, number three. And you're in an empty stomach, so there's no saturation of glucose, fats, or proteins in that environment because you just had a 24-hour fast. So your liver is empty, and you've done all of this clearing and waste removal. So that when it's time to eat again, there's not really negative effects from the food, unless like you break your fast with some garbage, tons of saturated fat, processed foods, low in fiber, dehydrating foods. That's a different story because that's immediately toxic. So that will really eat into a lot of the benefits from the fast. So don't do that. Food choice still matters, right? So if you're going to get your proteins and your fats, you should get it from poly and monounsaturated fat sources. You should have some water-rich foods in there and things like that. So it should be good quality foods, right? Whether it be sweet potato, black beans, red kidney beans, cabbage, or broccoli, or whatever. You can have like a good savory cooked meal, sweet potato, avocado, mushrooms, things like this. You can have a good, savory, delicious meal. It's not overly excessively heavy. It's not, processed foods and things like that. So there's still foods that are beneficial for your gut microbiome, nutrient-dense, whole foods. It's the best route to go. And then you go to sleep on that. You have amazing sleep. Rinse and repeat. Man, I've been talking all of that. I've been going on and on, right? Look at that. We're nearly 2 hours in, y'all. Let me get up with these comments here. Folks, let me before I do that, let me put the banner up, right? I put a lot of information on you. I done explained all this stuff. Complicated. Talking about leptin, ghrelin, insulin, glucagon, glycation. Talk about all this stuff. That's kind of thyroid, TBG. All that. I don't know. It's a lot, right? You may need to watch this live stream a few times, right? But if you want coaching, you want to get on a call, you want to join my 12-week mentorship, anything like that, there's a link to all those things available. If you hit the link in the description of this video, it'll take you to all of that, right? So you can book a call, you can get on my newsletter, you can sign up for personalized coaching, get a custom diet plan, get a custom training plan. Whatever you may do, you can sign up for whatever you want. Those things are in the link in the description. Secondly, hit the like button, smash the like button, like the stream if you like the stream, all right? And now let me see if I can catch up with y'all in these comments. By the way, this is ginger tea with cayenne pepper. All right, let's get into it. Can you break down the nervous system and the importance of B12 for nerve function, having problems with extreme fatigue? I mean, that's a, I don't know how simply I can do that. That's a pretty elaborate question. When you say break down the nervous system, there's a lot of different points to that. You can't just talk about B12 in a vacuum when it comes to fatigue or your nervous system because there's so many other things involved. And if you're dealing with like extreme fatigue, it could be insulin resistance, it could be dopamine resistance, it could be a hypothyroidism, it could be like a tumor in the pituitary gland, it could be fatty liver, it could be kidney disease of some way, shape, or form, it could be really poor sleep quality as a magnesium deficiency, it could be a vitamin D deficiency. It could be a lot of different things, right? So if you're dealing with an issue like that, you probably got a lot of check engine lights going on. Essentially, your nervous system is a network in which messages travel back and forth. All right. Oh, hold on. Yeah. So it's a network that messages travel back and forth. So you have a gut-brain axis. So you have your head brain, your gut brain, and you have all of these nerves. You have your spine that sends messages back and forth in between, right? And you have nerves that basically connect to every fiber, every muscle, everything in your whole entire body, right? And there's all of these messages. And those messages require hormones to transmit those messages, right? So you have hormones, which are neurotransmitters, and they transmit messages that go throughout your nervous system, right? Increase this, decrease that, turn this off, turn that on, warm this up, cool that down, right? Increase the feeling here, decrease the feeling there, send more blood flow to here, remove that blood flow from there. It's all of that. And it's just back and forth all day, nonstop. Bam, 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 constantly, right? And then you need all of this oxygen and then minerals, and the minerals got to bind to amino acids and vitamins, and they come together and they create more neurotransmitters, and you have neurotransmitters breaking down and being replaced, and you got more hormones being formed. It's all this stuff going on in your body constantly. It's chaos. It's organized chaos in your body all day long, right? And, you know, you have your vitamins and amino acids and minerals, and they're all governing this process. There are so many moving elements in your nervous system that, like, to boil it down to just like one thing, like B12, it'd be impossible. The only way you would have a fixation on B12 is if, like, you did a blood test or something like that, and it came back that you had a B12 deficiency. If you have a B12 deficiency, then the answer would be, number one, improve the health of your gut microbiome, because that's the leading cause in B12 deficiency. Because B12 is what's called a postbiotic, okay? B12 is made by bacteria, right? Bacteria made inside your body creates the B12 made inside your body, right? Animal products contain B12 because their gut makes B12. Our bodies make B12, or we have B12 in our body because our guts make B12, right? And then B12 exogenously comes from bacteria that creates uh, B12. And that would be like from like fresh water and things like that, right? So you improve your gut microbiome, and that would help to increase your B12 levels. And then you can get fortified plant-based milks, nutritional yeast. You can take a B complex supplement. You can get one, from example, made by Pure, or you can get one called Flora Vital. Those are like food-based ones that I personally know of and use. And you can get a lot of B12 from those. I know that Pure and I believe Flora Vital, they have the most absorbable form of B12, and it's methylcobalamin, right? And that's like the most high quality one or whatever, right? So that's what I would say about that. But if you're experiencing extreme fatigue, you may want to check to make sure that you don't have a vitamin D deficiency or a magnesium deficiency. You want to make sure that your diet isn't low in potassium or phosphorus or manganese, because are you experiencing muscle fatigue, or are you experiencing just low energy in general, or what kind of fatigue are you feeling? If it's like muscle spasms, muscle weakness, it can be a lack of potassium, it can be a lack of phosphorus, lack of magnesium, lack of manganese, because these minerals help to shuttle nutrients and calcium into those tissues and generate ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy molecule that powers your cells, right? Vitamin D, if you have a vitamin D deficiency, that can just disrupt your whole entire metabolism. Vitamin D deficiency is the leading factor in developing autoimmune disorders. So if you're having that issue, it's important to note that. So if you do have a vitamin D deficiency, it would be a good idea to like supplement with like 5,000, IUs of vitamin D, or 2,000 IUs of vitamin D, vitamin D3, to get like mushrooms in your diet, for example, and vitamin D fortified plant-based milks, coconut yogurt, things like that, right? So that's what I would say about your nervous system and B12. So I did my best at answering that to try to give you some valuable answers there. But definitely book a call with me, because we would need some time to really flesh that out and get to the root of the issue there. Patty, love what you're saying, brother. What's the ideal muscle and weight gain method for a 20-year-old man? What is the ideal? That's a good question. I mean, look, I love lifting with dumbbells, barbells, cables. I love resistance bands, body weight. I would say a mix of everything, right? Different exposures to different stimulus. But then it also depends on what you have access to. So let's say if you didn't have access to a gym, or you didn't have time in your schedule to consistently make it to the gym, well, then training with a barbell wouldn't be like ideal unless you had a barbell and a squat rack and all that type of stuff in your house. So what would be more ideal if you're just going to train from home or outdoors would be resistance bands and body weight, right? If you have like issues with your tendons and ligaments, you experience a lot of joint pain, things like that, conventional weights may be too abrasive on your connective tissues, so you may want to instead pivot more towards resistance bands because they're easier on your joints. So that may be ideal. So it depends on your circumstances, right? Which would be the answer to my question as far as that's concerned. Great talk. If you don't want to lose any weight, what kind of fasting do you recommend? I'm in early menopause, if that matters. Okay, so the thing, fasting, you don't necessarily. So like with the type of fasting strategy that I just explained, you don't really lose any muscle mass at all. In fact, it makes it easier to gain muscle mass, because as you become more insulin sensitive and you're storing less toxins in your body's more insulin sensitive, which means when you eat carbohydrates and proteins and things like that, it shuttles those nutrients to your muscle tissue a lot more effectively, right? And also, if you have used a fasting day to reduce the amount of acid accumulation and toxicity buildup in your body, you have lower levels of inflammation. Therefore, recovery from training happens in a shorter period of time, and your recovery is a lot better and a lot more effective, which means that your capacity to gain muscle increases because the faster you recover, the more muscle you build. Right? So fasting is actually good not only for weight loss, but weight gain when we're talking about dropping body fat and building muscle mass. And it works for people who are in menopause as well. And this is more sustainable, especially for women, because women, you don't really, for women, fasting can be beneficial, but up until a point, because fasting is a stressor. So the longer the fast is, the more intense it is. What happens is the fasting decreases progesterone. So your body can respond by increasing estrogen. And estrogen creates more fat storage and increases lipogenesis. So if you're trying to drop body fat, it can kind of work against you when you break your fast, right? So your cortisol levels go up and your estrogen levels go up to try to bring your cortisol levels down. High levels of estrogen, and then if you have enough dietary fats and proteins in your diet, this could have a negative effect on your thyroid hormone because of the TBG that I mentioned earlier. So you get diminishing returns. But if you do like an alternate, like 1 day on, 1 day off, 24-hour fast, 26-hour fast, something like that, and you have like a diet that is really compatible with that lifestyle, you can mitigate those negative effects and have a more sustainable type of fasting. Kylie, I incorrectly thought I had to eat full meals 3 times a day and snack and couldn't figure out why I felt awful all the time. I started fasting and realized I don't need food constantly. Yeah, it's true. I mean, look, the more you eat, I mean, it wears you down after a while. You know, everything has diminishing returns. Everything. Even building muscle mass has more diminishing returns. Like, building too much muscle can cause you to feel miserable, and destroy your mental health, your metabolic health, and kills you earlier, right? Protein, you eat too much of it, it's too much acid accumulation, and it just really erodes your kidney health, liver, etc. Diminishing returns, right? You got a lot of bodybuilders and whatnot, and they disagree with me, and I'm like, all right, well, you know what? Show me the really muscular elderly people, right? Where they're huge and muscular, and they live to like 80, 90 years old, right? They don't happen. Because you're that bodybuilder, you know you can't sustain it because it just wear on you. I've been in the fitness world for a very long time. I've spoken to people personally who are really advanced bodybuilders and all of that type of stuff, and they get older and they all tell you the same thing. They switched to like calisthenics, they stopped eating as much, they went plant-based. I mean, even people like Mike Tyson and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all of this, they were collapsing under the weight of doing all of this training and building muscle and eating, and they felt miserable, and that's why they switched to plant-based and all lost weight and all this type of stuff. Dave Bautista, same thing. They have to lose the weight because they start feeling like garbage. It's not sustainable. There's no arguing with me on this, right? Everybody eventually capitulates and comes to what I've been saying. So I've been here advocating for the same thing for years, and all of these people who would disagree with me, they end up coming right back around. Even the celebrities, they start going plant-based, they start going high raw, they start dropping the weight, getting leaner, and they're like, oh, my joints feel better. What you call it? Sylvester Stallone switched to resistance bands. Oh, my joints feel amazing, and I'm able to maintain my fit. Same thing. So these people, I'm like, I'm glad you guys are catching up to me. I appreciate that. Look at that. So let me brag a little bit. Let me flex, but yeah. Callie girl, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Yay, my favorite nutritionist. Thanks so much for changing my life and shaking high blood pressure and its toxic medications. That's right. Big shout out to you. Yeah, we won that fight. Absolutely. Would fasting every other day be advisable for me? I mean, I would say it's advisable for most people under. Oh, wait a minute. There's a comment you left under. All right, Matthew, peace God. I'm on a raw vegan and I'm a raw vegan and been on a full high water diet for almost a year. Lost a ton of weight and want to put muscle on again. Starting in October, I added sprouts, grains, avocado, and tofu. There we go. Well, you're adding more things like that. Yeah, I think the fasting every other day could be beneficial, definitely. And the cool thing about the fasting is you can start adding in more of the dietary fats. You can start adding in more nuts and seeds, grains, legumes, more starchy foods, and things like that. Yeah. I mean, look, even the fruit-based thing that also has diminishing returns. This is why I don't tell people to swear off anything that's not a fruit. I'm not an extremist, right? Like I said, everything has a codependent relationship with something else. Your fruits are mainly going to be water rich, fiber rich, water soluble, vitamin rich, but they're not very rich in things like zinc. They're not very rich in things like selenium, chromium. They're not very rich in the protein, omega-3, omega-6, things like that. So you do have to have other foods in your diet that cover those needs, right? So fruits are phenomenal and they can make up most of your diet, and that's a great way to eat. However, it doesn't mean that you have to swear off everything else, right? So I believe in balance. I want to normalize a raw vegan diet. I don't want to make it this fringe thing. It's a normal thing, all right? So, your rolled oats, your sprouted legumes, things like that, your leafy greens. Yeah, get all of that in there. Coach, is there a difference between how long blood glucose spike? Oh, okay, yeah, I answered that question already. All right. Let's see, there we go. How can I reduce head congestion and dizziness? I think that's a cause of my high blood pressure. Well, the question is, what is the cause of the dizziness and head congestion? It seems like you got some excess mucus built up. So I think like having more astringent fruits in your diet, and drinking herbal teas that have more of that astringent quality in them, and your leafy greens would definitely help a lot. So getting more pineapple in your diet, citrus fruits, pears, apples, cherries, pomegranate, grapes, berries, your tender leafy greens. So not like phosphorus or sulfur-rich greens like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. More of the things like Swiss chard, spinach, kale, arugula, things like that. And then you can drink, let's say ginger tea is really good for clearing up mucus, basil tea, cinnamon tea, turmeric tea, and then adding a pinch of cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper has something called capsaicin in it, which reduces mucus and oxygenates your lungs and your nasal passage. So that can really clear things up, hydrate your lungs, reduce the mucus output, and so you basically can clear all of that up, and you get more oxygen to your brain, so you have less dizziness and that type of thing. And more oxygen gives you more vasodilation and helps to lower your blood pressure. So that would be my answer to that. Let's see. What would be a day of eating in Chronometer that would max out all your bars? I'm doing good, but vitamin E and vitamin K are hard to get. Vitamin K is not hard to get. No, no, no. Vitamin K is really easy to get. So basically, addressing vitamin E, I think a good way to get your vitamin E intake consistently would be foods like your darkest, deepest leafy green vegetables like kale, spinach, Swiss chard, watercress, red butter lettuce, kiwis, blueberries, blackberries, coconut, avocado. Those are foods that contain substantial amounts of vitamin E and vitamin K. Also, sunflower seed kernels, another really good source of vitamin E in particular. All right. As far as a full day of eating, I mean, I went on long in this stream. I'm gonna have to do another stream about that. Matter of fact, you know what? If you want to go and do live meal prep, you got to join the 12-week mentorship and join the tribe. We got like whole live streams dedicated to going into Chronometer and doing meal planning and stuff like that. And I have those up right now for members. Yeah, so I post those live streams. So if you really want to get into that whole Chronometer thing, either wait until the next stream I do it or jump into the 12-week mentorship. And I go live every Thursday with the tribe, and we do live meal planning. We go in depth. And, you know, I do live meal planning for individuals who are in the voice chat and asking for things. So you can ask Q&A, you can get on the voice chat and all of that type of stuff. So yeah, we really hash it out. But all right, it's getting late and I got to get my steps in for the day because today's been a really busy day for me. I got to get out there. But yeah, folks, if you need help, you want coaching or book a call with me, anything like that, hit the link in the description of this video. Okay, like the stream. Let's get the likes up. Come on now, let's get the likes up. And I think I covered everything. I think I did everything I wanted to cover today. We got the Q&A in, we got the fasting in, the oxalates, the glycation stuff, and we covered a lot. This is how we get on Mondays. All right. All right, well, I'll catch y'all in the next stream. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. And remember, anything that isn't growing is dying. You better do your best to make sure. What is the quote? I didn't forget the quote. Look at that. I got to do another take of that. I done forgot the quote. Anything that isn't growing is dying, so you better do your best. Look at that. I'm not even going to say the quote now. I'm going to have to put it in text or something. I'm all mumble mouth and whatnot. Look at that. I can't do catchphrases and slogans. That's not a part of me. I just be bare bones, just hard facts. I can't even get my catchphrases right. I'm gonna have to practice. I'm gonna go for my walk and repeat the phrase, but I gotta find out what it is. All right. Do your best to live free or die trying. Was that it? Was that the second part of it? Anyways, all right, folks, have a good night. Get some rest. I'm not going to keep y'all up all night. I'll catch y'all in the next stream.